Rosa. How have you been feeling? Have you been taking your medications? I bet they've helped you get at least a bit better.
I think our definitions of better are different at this point.
Well then, why don't you just tell me what happened to you again?
Okay. Well, when I was about 15, I started having trouble sleeping and waking up my parents. But I couldn't help it. The figures kept me up with their antics. My mother asked me what was happening, and I told her, but she didn't understand.
Helen, what's so funny?
The figures. They do some funny things.
What figures? There's no one here but you and me.
They keep waking me up at night and telling me funny stories. I told them to quiet down, but
But they're not real. You're too old for imaginary friends.
they're not imaginary friends.
Helen, I'm tired of these games.
But
Enough!
the figures I saw became almost like my friends. Later, I told my mother about what they said, about her being in danger. That was when she told the rest of the town. They dragged me from my home to the prison. They told me I was possessed by a demon and declared me as dangerous. People getting hurt by each other every day. Men, women, children. My friends told me the other inmates were too dangerous to ignore, so that morning I attacked one of them. They restrained me even when I was just trying to help. They made me take pills to make my friends go away, to make me better. In the other rooms, I could hear the cracks of electricity, the splashes of people being dunked in water, and their screams to accompany it all. They let me spend a few hours unrestrained, like so many of the other inmates in Auburn Prison, 1821. I tried to jump. It was too much, too frustrating that no one understood. The conditions I lived in were horrible and I wanted it all to end. But they wouldn't let me. I tried to escape like all the younger ones I considered children had. I wanted to get to the new juvenile detention centers with them. But finally, 4 years later, in 1825, the Boston Prison Discipline Society called for improved conditions. Then I was only restrained after my so-called episodes, and the noises in the other rooms stopped. I was visited by a lady. She was much nicer than all the other doctors and nurses I had seen. Her name was Dorothea Dix.
Dorothea Dix traveled along the East Coast, visiting the mentally ill. When she realized how horrible the conditions they lived in were, she created mental houses specially for people with mental diseases or disorders. She made it so there were more hospitals for the mentally ill, with much kinder treatment of the patients. I shall be obliged to speak with great plainness, and to reveal many things revolting to the taste, and from which my woman's nature shrinks with peculiar sensitiveness. But truth is the highest consideration. I tell what I have seen, painful and as shocking as the details often are, that from them you may feel more deeply the imperative obligation which lies upon you to prevent the possibility or of a repetition of or continuance of such outrages upon humanity. If I inflict pain upon you and move you to horror, it is to acquaint you with the suffering which you have the power to alleviate, and make you hasten to relieve the victims of legalized barbarity.
I remember her hair pulled back on her head, and her soft voice. She was much more understanding than the other doctors. She reminded me somewhat of my mother, except she understood more. Even when I spoke to my friends, she just nodded. She said she would help. Soon after, I was moved to a new place. It was sort of like a hospital, but also like a home, with people like me. I got my own room on the bottom floor, all to me and my friends, with one window in the wall. The woman who came to take care of me every day told me that I would have a visitor, January 18th, 1841. His name was Dr. John Galt. At least that's what his name tag said. After he left, my caretaker handed me a pill out of a small bottle that had his name on it.
Dr. John Galt got involved in the controversy over whether prisons were for punishment or rehabilitation. He wanted to help people with mental disorders to be treated better while they recovered. Galt shared his ideas of new medicines, talk therapy, outplacement stays, and more humane asylum conditions. He and Dorothea Dix were two major contributors to the 19th century reform.
Afterwards, I heard two nurses talking outside my door.
I'm not sure she's ready for this. She needs this prison. She's dangerous.
No, she doesn't. I'm sure if she stays here, she'll only get worse. She doesn't need punishment. She needs help. Dr. Galt is right. Prisons are no place for children like her. It's not like she could help herself.
This is her help. Prison is her rehabilitation.
I bet if you asked her, she wouldn't think that prison is good for her.
Well, it doesn't matter either way. Our opinions don't affect this. It's out of our hands.
I went to go live with a new family, and I started getting better. Instead of trying to tell them, I ignored the figures as they came, which was less and less with the medications. I soon found out that not everyone was as nice as Dr. Galt and my new family. Under the IEP, I was allowed to go back to school for a little while. Like I had passed one test to be released back into society and slipped into another to see if I could survive. I started high school again. The kids there didn't even seem to notice me, but I preferred that to what came next, though. They found out about my disease and my suicide attempt. They waved their arms in front of me and said things like,
"This too much for you? Why don't you go back to the nut house?"
Things went downhill from there. I wasn't motivated to do anything, and anything I did do seemed stupid or wrong. My new parents signed me up for counselor meetings. She said,
Your schizophrenia seems to have been re-triggered by depression. Pressure, helplessness, hopelessness, passivity, boredom, fear, isolation, and dehumanization could all be a part of this. But no, you're not alone. These are all issues that we can work at. I want you to know exactly what is happening so that you can make yourself feel a little better. One step at a time, we can change the situation.
At first I told her I knew I wasn't alone because I had my friends with me wherever I went. But then I must have looked at her like she had three eyes because I didn't know what I had infesting my head. It got so bad I stopped going to school. Then my friends told me about my sister being in danger. I told her, but she wouldn't listen. It ended with me pinning her on the floor, screaming in her face. I knew there was no point in fighting then. I was going to an institution. I was told most of my rights were covered by the ADA.
The ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act, worked to ensure the rights of people with physical and mental disabilities.
This is because I was considered
A person who has physical or mental impairment and substantially limits one or more major life activity, but can still make their own decisions and take their own consequences. However, we as a government facility have the responsibility to recognize, facilitate, and respect people like you. Though your old public school was not environmentally adequate, we would not have been able to provide you with educational help because the IEP had determined that it is not in your vital education.
The IEP, or the Individual Education Program, requires public schools to provide for disabled children. The IEP team decides if the child needs the program.
Now I'm here, being treated for my schizophrenia, talking to you about my years of life.
Helen, you're a girl that I do say seems to have an old soul, but you're only 14. You're saying that these things happened, but they didn't to you directly. The best I can figure is that you learned about them in school or heard about them somewhere else, and they've been intertwined into these ideas about your life. A doctor never assigned you to stay in a prison. You grew up here. You never started with a new family. You were never visited by Dix or Galt.
Maybe.
You say like go.
Go.
What else?
Go.
Where am I lying?
I saw almost became... But
Enough.
So that morning, I attacked one of them. Too frustrating that no one understood. Now I'm here talking to you. Sorry, I missed it. I went to go live with a new family. I tried to. Sorry.